few people have sent me this video and asked me for my views on taxing the rich. I'd like to stress the difference between the international sphere, the national sphere, and the Frankenstein that is capitalism. So Gary Stevenson wants to tax the rich, and anyone who's from a poor background like me would be like, hell yeah, this is a good idea. But this is a set of policy prescriptions for the domestic sphere, and the unintended consequences could be devastating. For example, capital flight. A small number of very rich people that do pay tax might leave. Now, some people think that this is a wonderful idea. They'll drive them to the airport themselves. But this would be devastating for the country. Someone, for example, pays 100 million in tax a year, then how do we fill that gap if they leave? You would have to create jobs for, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people just to fill the gap of that one person leaving. Actually, this is why this guy is basically saying that the conversation at the moment is not complicated enough. And this is absolutely correct. And this is what brings us onto the international sphere. Because what we actually need is a global regulatory framework in order to help address this problem. But how could this possibly be brought about? I'm going to give you 3 options. And there's not much hope in either of them. First option is global civil society. Workers of the world unite. Come on, we have access to the internet. We can do all this sort of stuff. The hope in the post-1990s was that the global civil society would rise in power, and this would see the power of the state decline in this globalized era. The problem is that the state is back, baby, in a big way, in large part because of nationalism. And what's this seen is that global civil society is actually not bringing about any radical change at all. Second option is international organizations, you know, the ones that are actually meant to manage the international sphere. The World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, but these have implemented structural adjustment policies, etc. for decades, which has helped bring about this very gross inequality in the first place. So these do not look like a knight in shining armor on the horizon anytime soon. The third option then, and this brings back the centrality of the state, that we need governments themselves to do this, which sounds a bit crazy. The moment, the hegemon of the US is definitely not going to be doing this. But really, when you rule out global civil society and you rule out international organizations, it's difficult to see any change coming. All this reveals that the only real hope we have is the ballot box. And we've got to elect the leaders that want to bring about the change, and they need to be elected at the same time as other leaders around the world want to bring about the same change, which highlights the profoundly complex position that we find ourselves in. Overall, it seems glaringly obvious that we have to address global inequality. To do this, we do need to tax the rich, but we have to be very careful of the unintended consequences that could leave individual countries exposed and vulnerable. We need some sort of global mechanism, but how this is brought about, answers on a postcard, please.